spending a lot of time trying to figure out what steps to take for my businesses to kind of avoid the problems that social distancing and the slowdown, the economic slowdown, was causing my businesses. And I'm a co-founder of Rising Tide Innovation Center, and I thought that probably our members and other small business owners were probably having the same problems that that I was having. So it might be useful to share kind of the information I'm finding along the way. So basically, this series is me distilling what I'm learning each week and kind of putting it into a discussion. So the first week we talked about federal relief programs and grant resources that are available to small businesses, and these are on YouTube. So if you really want to watch me in a boring, bad YouTube video, it's there. The second week I summarized kind of what experts are saying about what the economy is going to look like post-pandemic. And then the third week, this is my bio if you need it for any reason. And then this week I want to talk about kind of the frustrating status of federal programs. And discuss what else businesses should be doing right now kind of to protect their businesses today, and then also looking forward to the reopening of the economy whenever that occurs, whether that's May 1st, May 15th, or some heretofore not identified date in the future. So as you probably know, the funds for the PPP and the EIDL program ran out on last Thursday. Congress is still debating what additional funding is going to be provided to replenish those relief programs. As of last night, which is of course nothing approved yet, but it appears the proposal is going to add $250 billion to the PPP program, $50 billion to the economic injury disaster loan program, $75 billion to hospital funding, and $25 billion to expand testing capacity so that we can start the reopening of the economy. Of course, all of that could change by the time they actually vote on it. Well, it is anticipated that the opposition to this proposal are going to call for a roll call vote, which is going to mandate that all congressional members come back to Washington to vote in person. So that will probably delay this process. So I would expect that we would probably see this at the end of the week at the earliest. So anyway, it is what it is. That's what the notice is. I don't know if either you or Andre got PPP funding. My applications did not make the first round, but I spoke with my bank this morning and they said, yeah, you're going to be in the second round. So we'll see how that goes. So like I said, with regard to PPP funding, what can you be doing right now? There's absolutely no official guidance as to what you should do with your pending application, whether you have to refile, all of that stuff. I suggest you contact your lender. Some lenders are still processing. Some lenders have stopped processing, but it's good to check in and see, and then also catch any things that they're saying that you still need to submit in order to be into that second round of funding. If it goes like the first round, the money will be gone in less than 2 weeks. So better safe than sorry to do the check-in. With regard to the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Advance Program, before funding ran out last week, they had already changed the program from a $10,000 advance loan to $1,000 per employee. So that meant you could get up to $10,000 depending on the number of employees that you had. If you applied through the expedited portal, which is what they told us to do, there is absolutely no way to check your application status. If you applied through the long process of the longer form that's online or in person, on paper, then you can check through the EIDL application portal. The link is on this slide, but I'll also send it out at the end if you want to do that. So that applies if you did the full application for EIDL, which is like pages and pages and pages, as opposed to the 10-minute fill in this your EIN and keep going. So I am in that category of people who can't check their application status. I have a number that says it was submitted, but so anyway, I also read in the chat rooms that people are talking about the EIDL program, that there's a rumor that the total amount you're going to be able to get out of EIDL, just the regular loan program, not just the advance, is going to be $25,000 per business. But I haven't been able to see that anywhere on SBA's site or anywhere else. So I don't know if that's a rumor or if that is true. But if anybody finds out about that, kind of post that to our Facebook page or whatever, so that people can know what, what they should be expecting from that program. With regard to grant funds, The City of Tampa and the City of St. Petersburg grant programs have been way oversubscribed. And the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation grant program, which opened yesterday at noon, crashed by 3 and was oversubscribed and is no longer taking applications. So I tried at 12, I couldn't get in. I tried at 3, it said the website was no longer working, and at 6 they came on and said there's no more applications. So there you go. That being said, I'm continuing to scan feeds for grant resources that are up for application. The ones I found this week that I haven't already posted mostly apply to arts institutions and freelancers. So if you fall into that category, watch the Facebook page. I'll be posting a couple more up later today. And if you find any, please feel free to post them to Facebook in one of our, in a comment section or whatever, and we'll share those broadly, because I think one of the things small businesses need to be doing is supporting each other as we try and get through this. So with all that happy news, what else should businesses be doing right now to survive? I've listened to a bunch of webinars this week from like Inc. magazine, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Tampa Hillsborough Action Plan, and there are a couple others, and it seems like their recommendations are falling into 4 categories. 1, maintaining visibility with customers to maintain your market share. 2, using technology, both old school and new, to expand your business communications. 3, reviewing contracts to reduce or eliminate expenses if you can. And 4, beginning to analyze what you need to do to reopen, in the happy thought that we're going to actually get to do that at some point in the near future. So what does maintaining visibility really mean when your doors are closed and it's difficult? Since you have very little street traffic, the most obvious place to go to maintain visibility is the internet. But really, everybody's now on the internet. So what is working? For businesses that already have a website or an email newsletter or text messaging with customers or active social media channels, the answer seems to be to do more of what you've already been doing, and to communicate how you're still available to serve your customers. Most of the talks on social media have emphasized that what's important is that you create content that communicates what you have to offer and how customers can access it. So you have to think about the ways you're going to be able to reach your customers. Some examples of new creative ways businesses are reaching customers. There's some jewelry stores that are doing one-on-one video chats with customers to show them jewelry, and then accepting payments through the internet portals and having the jewelry hand delivered to the customer. There are car dealerships that are doing virtual tours of cars so that you can have the dealership experience from home, and then they're processing the transactions through remote contracts back and forth. So think about how your services can be delivered. It may not be the traditional way of doing it, but maybe there are ways to use digital communications to do that. If your service is completely shut down, for instance, if you're a massage therapist or a nail salon, the experts suggest positioning yourself as an expert and offering tips to customers that can kind of help them through the difficult times so that they know that you care. So the examples that were given were like a massage therapist might create content on how to relax muscles while you're working at your computer, and a salon might offer tips on doing your own nails so that until you can get back into the salon to have them done professionally. If you're a B2B business, meaning you're selling to other businesses, what should you be doing? That's a different set of messaging on the internet because you're not going to individual customers. Experts suggest checking in with existing customers and asking how you can help. And for new sales, offering trial periods or delayed first payments may be effective in getting new customers in place, even though they're nervous about spending money during the economic slowdown. Oops. Guess what? I forgot to turn my phone off. Sorry. Okay, so I should also say at this point, since that's just happened, I also have 2 Siberian Huskies who occasionally participate. So doing business remotely, what kind of tools should you use to communicate if you haven't been doing virtual communications up to this point? It seems like the best advice is to start with whatever you have. So if you have email addresses for customers, use those and send an email update. If you have an active Facebook or Instagram feed, use that. If you have phone numbers, consider a text campaign or just a good old-fashioned phone call. We actually did that at Rising Tide, and we really found our members were appreciated that call. What if you have nothing in place? Well, the good news is you have a lot of room to grow. This is a time to learn new skills. So the experts suggest starting with one social media channel that best meets your target demographic and product type and focusing on that. And so by demographic, they mean Facebook tends to reach older consumers, Instagram and TikTok reach younger consumers. Twitter's are kind of across the board, but it's text-based. Instagram has got visual content. So look and see if there's, you may also want to build a web page if you can sell through a virtual store. Looking at organizations you participate in, many local chambers of commerce, including ours in St. Petersburg, are publicizing what their members are doing and offering. So if you're a restaurant or another delivery pickup service, you can also find postings online that are Google Docs that kind of list aggregated information about who's open, what they're doing, how you get access to their services. It's worth a couple hours to search around and get your name on as many of those lists as you can. Join groups on Facebook and LinkedIn. Many of the small business groups on Facebook are doing periodic ask your members to describe your business. If you don't have a lot of content or contacts, using those opportunities to ask people to contact you is a good way to build a client contact list so that you can then try and spread your information. Explore referral partnerships with other businesses that have complementary services and have already done this and have a platform that they're out there. It's a good time to make friends in the business world. In some ways, it's just like when you're starting your business. If when you started your business, you went door to door and connected people one-on-one, you probably need to try and replicate that virtually. If your business strategy initially was to do advertising in a kind of a broad scope, then your strategy might be to use different media channels to try and reach a broader group. However you deliver it, the goal is to get people to engage with your content, either by liking or commenting or responding to the call to action and post. The idea is to start a conversation because that's how you really connect with people. The experts also say that if you've been using one or two channels effectively, you can consider expanding your channels, but remember that each channel does require unique content, and you need to ask yourself which channels are going to reach your customers, because not every type of business has customers who use Twitter or TikTok, etc. The important part of all of this is to keep your business top of mind so that when doors do reopen, your customers remember to come back. Like, that's basically what we're trying to do. So the other big question that came up every time they talked about social media on these webinars is, well, what am I supposed to be saying to these customers right now? What do people want to hear about? So, so that you don't come off just being a hard sell kind of feeling, which is a turnoff for everybody. Several panelists on different webinars all came back to connecting doing business with your business to helping the community. So reminding people that because small business is the backbone of most communities, them buying from you is helping you support families that are in the community. So it's really about, connecting how helping your business actually supports the larger community. Another key message is gratitude, and customers want to hear that you appreciate them and their patronage during the pandemic, and that you're thankful that you're able to offer what you're able to offer right now. So bitterness does not sell, gratitude does sell, because people feel comfortable. The third message is that you should be asking how you can help your customers, whether this is in one-on-one communications, which are highly recommended because people really value that hands-on touch, or a more general posting of information that will aid customers while they stay at home. Customers are looking for solutions to problems, and just like business as normal, the businesses that provide the solutions are going to be the ones that actually get the business. So, tools to consider. If this is not your area of expertise, and I'm definitely one of those people, I've been learning a lot about technology in the last couple of weeks. Consider using technology to make your work more efficient. Social media management tools like Hootsuite and Buffer, and that's just two. There's probably 20 or 30 of those kind of services out there. I actually found an article that summarized how each one was different, which channels they have. So if you Google social media management pros and cons, it pops up as in the feed of Google results. Check it out if you're looking for that, because it was helpful. And And that'll let you manage and schedule your content being published on your social media channels. You can schedule posts in advance and measure what times and days that are best for responses. The experts I listened to noted that during the pandemic, the times and days that traditionally have worked may not be working right now because people are online at different times. So just kind of pay attention to that in terms of your responses so that you start posting when people are most available to listen to it. None of them had exact recommendations though. They all said, oh, well, it depends on your industry and blah, 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 blah. So I can give you no real guidance other than you should monitor it and figure it out. Another type of tool that businesses are adding is the ability to take payment online to minimize the need for face-to-face contact and speed transactions. There are many tools for this, ranging from QuickBooks, you can do it through your bookkeeping, PayPal, Stripe, but there's many, many choices. Check the fees in all of them because some of them take more than others, and see what integrates well with your existing platforms, whether that's on social media or your website, because the integration part can be a gigantic pain, just saying that from experience. So, but once you get it done, it's awfully nice to have it, So another type of tool that is becoming more popular is what I'm calling kind of the Uber CRM system, which is platform like a Podium is one of them that links all of your digital communications with your customers, like text and email and chat. So you can capture that contact information of people that are engaging with your content. Just a quick note, Podium, which I was one of the speakers on one of the webinars, which is how I found out about them. They have a COVID-19 resources page that's a little bit like an infomercial in the sense that it has stories of how people are using their product well. But what I thought was interesting is it's also really telling the story of how different businesses are communicating over these channels. So it might be worth a look just to see, this is how insurance companies are doing it. This is how, blah, blah, blah is doing it. So anyway, so you can check that out if you want to. Platform is also, or Podium is also offering free services to all businesses for 30 days. They've been so subscribed that they have a wait list that you post your name on, and they say they'll get back to you within a week to get you signed up for 30 days of free using of their services. They do things like web chat monitoring and those kind of things, which can connect data, give you data. The link to sign up for the wait list is right there on the screen. So what else do you need to be doing? And now I'm going to sound a lot like a lawyer, which incidentally I am. You need to be looking at your leases and your vendor contracts for relief. First, you have to decide on a strategy for each creditor. Are you asking for forbearance or a temporary relief, or do you want to terminate the contract? For leases, there are a couple provisions you should look at, and if reading your leases is confusing, this might be a good time to consult an attorney. Not because I am an attorney, but just simply because leases can be 50 pages of gobbledygook. So having said that, start by reading your lease. For your commercial lease, read it first, because even if you read it when you first signed it, unless you've just gotten a lease, you probably have forgotten what it says. I know I have, and I write them for a living. So check out, when does your lease expire? Like, how much longer do you have on your lease? Did you sign a personal or a corporate guarantee? That means that you'll be on the hook personally for unpaid rent if you terminate. What are its terms? Do you have a security deposit on file? Do you have the last month's rent on file? Figure out what you can be held liable for and what you have to lose. And also figure out what counts as a default. Is there a grace period for paying your rent late? It may be a strategy to say, I can pay up until the 15th, so I'm going to pay on the 14th instead of paying on the 1st, because that buys you a couple of weeks. If you close your store for a particular length of time, does that automatically create a default? Some leases have that provision in it. So look for words in the lease that reference pandemics and infectious disease, just to see if you've got a specific clause in there. Here's a spoiler alert. Not many leases currently have that, but leases going forward are all going to have that. So just read it, know that it's coming, right? I wrote my first pandemic clause in a lease last week, so I know that they're coming. If not, you need to look at clauses relating to force majeure, commercial insurance, subletting, going dark, which is when you close your store for a period of time, condemnation or casualty provisions, late payment penalties, co-tenant requirements and what happens if you go bankrupt. Like, you need to just look and see what's going to happen if any of those scenarios happen. And if you don't know what any of those particular terms are, force majeure is like the act of God provisions. And if they're general, they can sometimes be helpful. If they're very, very specific and say hurricanes, tropical storms, flooding, you're not probably going to have coverage under your force majeure clause. But things like condemnation and casualty, depending on how that's framed, the partial or temporary taking of your space by the government requiring the closure might actually fall into one of those provisions. So the basic question with your lease is, do you want to stay or do you want to terminate it? If you want to terminate, you're going to be evaluating your potential liability and how you can reduce it. Are there provisions that reduce your guarantee over time so that it's less than a whole guarantee of the unpaid rent? Are there things that allow you to terminate without penalty if you can't operate the store as a result of no fault of your own? This is an area that I think is going to be litigated extensively, unfortunately, through insurance companies, because a lot of people are trying to see if they can claim under business interruption insurance to cover these expenses. And Tina Fisher week before last, did a presentation, which is also on YouTube, about one of my law partners, about restaurant and hospitality resources. But at the end of it, there's about 20 minutes on the whole discussion of business interruption insurance. So if you have a question about that, that's another resource to go to on YouTube to listen. We had a guest speaker come in and talk about that. Regardless of that, the same analysis applies to your lease. Is there a way that your lease allows you to exit due to the problems that aren't created by you? For instance, the city of Tampa has put language in its closure orders that assert that the pandemic is causing physical damage. And the reason they're doing that is most business interruption clauses have a provision in it that says you can't qualify it unless there is physical damage to your space. So they're asserting that it's physical damage. Whether that will work in a court of law remains to be seen. So on the other hand, if you want to stay, you need to look to how to renegotiate. And for that, you need to determine if you can say in any way that your landlord is in default. And how could your landlord be in default? Well, your landlord could be in default if your lease is conditioned upon the balance of the building remaining occupied at a certain level, and it requires that there be a certain number of tenants constantly operating. You can suggest that they have not performed and therefore you don't have to perform. So most often what that turns into is you don't have to pay rent until they can correct that problem. Again, this is going to be an area where negotiation is going to have to happen, because that's not what those provisions are really typically used for. They're used for things like strip malls, where you're a salon and you want to make sure the Publix is still in operation so that you get walked by traffic, that kind of thing. But it's worth taking a look at. The other question to ask is, if your landlord has shut your building, if they just made a decision, we're shutting your building down, is that a constructive eviction that can cause them to be in default? The kind of good news is that landlords are not really looking to have all of their buildings empty. Like, that's not their goal. So if there was ever a chance to negotiate, this is probably going to be it. So what should you do? Talk to your landlord about reducing the rent, whether that's rent forgiveness where you don't ever have to pay it, or it's rent forgiveness where they just tack on an extra month at the end of your lease. So you get a month of free rent or more than 1 month of free rent, whether you can do partial payments. All of that, what's really key is communicating so that your landlord knows where you are and you are kind of being very transparent about what you're trying to do. Some landlords are even looking at percentages of reduction in revenue and then applying that to reduce rental payments. And then there are some landlords that are refusing to negotiate at all. So, it's all over the board. So, and this again, just to say, if you have a difficult landlord, this is a good time to get a lawyer. So, same analysis for vendor contracts, except they're going to be more specific. If you have a recurring delivery, can you cancel it or reduce it without penalty? If the goods are consumable and you're forced to close, you may have an argument that it's impossible to perform under the contract to receive those goods. On the flip side, if you're supposed to be performing and delivering a service or a product and you can't because you're closed, what does your contract say about the penalties you owe to the other party? So you need to look at both your contracts out and your contracts coming in to see what those liabilities are. And again, frank communication is the best strategy right now, is just frankly telling people. It's like a lot of people read that Cheesecake Factory just wrote their landlords and said, well, we can't pay rent. Sorry. And, you know, while you may not have the economic power to be that blunt, which, you know, comes from having hundreds of restaurants, it's still the same concept. Hey, this is what's going on in my business. Let's work this out. So many vendors are doing things like contract delays, reducing payments that are due intermittently, offering discounts, and then you know, other types of specific relief that relate specifically to the type of service that's being provided. So now we get to the hopeful part of this presentation. The government has started to debate when the economy will reopen. And we're also having protests of people who want the economy to reopen. So could that be as early as May 1? Possibly. I think probably not in Florida, but possibly. May 15th, that seems to be a date that a lot of people are focusing on. And then other people are saying June. So in any event, if you shut down your business or you furloughed employees or you've canceled contract deliveries, you need to kind of take steps to be ready to reopen whenever that trigger happens. So you need to look at your business strategy first and kind of predict how the changes that have happened over the last couple of months are going to affect your business before you decide how to reopen. It may not be exactly how you opened before, were open before the business. My last week's presentation, I kind of summarized a whole bunch of kind of future people who are kind of predicting what changes are going to be in the economy. That might be worth listening to if you get into that kind of stuff and you find it helpful. That's also on YouTube. But basically, do you think you're going to have the same number of customers? Will they want the same or different products or services? And if you take, like, are they going to be worried about being in small spaces? Are they going to want more space between your aisles and your shopping? Are they going to be concerned about being in large groups? Those are the kind of things you have to ask yourself to figure out what do you need to do to your business when you reopen. And it's not just the physical, it's also the mental kind of process of how are customers going to want to interact with your floor staff? How are customers going to want to interact with you if you're providing a personal service? What level of disinfection or sanitation are they wanting to see evidence of to feel comfortable? So those are all questions that people are going to have to grapple with. And that may change your staffing requirements. That may change the equipment that you need. It may be that because of the type of equipment that you need to have it serviced before you restart it. So it may be that you need to have it re-inspected before you restart. All of those things are things you need to think about. So what I do, because I'm a lawyer and I'm a nerd, is I make checklists that keep track of kind of the steps that I think we're going to need to take. In broad strokes, I'm thinking about employees, I'm thinking about supply chain and supplies, having enough supplies but not too many supplies on hand. I'm thinking about customer communications, about how am I going to communicate that I'm open, and what am I going to try and tell people about why they can safely come back to my businesses. And then I'm going to be thinking about collecting payment. Does it make sense to do a lot more still online rather than in person? Will that be one of the things that people will be more comfortable with? I'm also thinking about, because one of my businesses is a lab, is reopening and having to get the equipment calibrated and kind of readjusted for a new day, a new happy day. The same thing is true, though, of even just basic cleaning and those kind of things, because if your store's been closed, you have your basic probably sweeping and mopping and that kind of stuff to do, but you may want to do more deep cleaning to make people feel comfortable so that you can say that you've met the CDC guidelines on cleaning, which, by the way, if you wonder what those are, go to the Center for Disease Control website. They have all sorts of handy information about what they're suggesting. So anyway, I'm hoping that those are the problems we have in the near future, is figuring out how to open. I'm going to stop sharing, and then hopefully if people want to have a conversation, we can chat about all this stuff. So there we go. So hi, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Thoughts, content added, useful, not useful? What do you think?
I found this to be very useful and very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
How's the co-working going in St. Pete? There are quite some co-working spaces open, right? And I think a new one is trying to open. And
Yep, we're going to have a neighbor. So it's actually like back to us, which is kind of, I kind of think of it as a good thing. I think because I think that co-working is going to become a bigger part of the way people work post this economy. And I think each co-working space has its own kind of focus and its own, I don't know, the way its community feels. So I think giving people choices, they'll find the place that is most comfortable for them. We're feeling good about it. We're in the midst of an expansion, believe that, in the middle of all this. We just got our building permit. So so we're going to add another floor. Woo woo. So yeah. So you know, so I think it remains to be seen. Of course, I'm swallowing hard, you know, knowing our lease is going to get bigger and all of that. But at the same time, we've had a lot of demand, even, you know, before this and even during it, you know, because we've remained open. So our essential people that are essential businesses, so our doors are locked, but our members who are essential businesses are able to use the space and take advantage of the resources. And we're monitoring it every week with what the county is saying about what should be happening in your space, and we'll open as soon as we are allowed to, you know, fully open back to other people. But in the meantime, you know, we've actually had people interested in joining for the first time since this all happened, because their kids are at home and they usually work at home, but now they've got kids going to school at home and this, that, and the other, and they actually need a place where they can get away. Doing conference calls, you know, all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of, like I said, it's a plus and a minus. You know, there's going to be a lot of spaces because Station House is expanding over into Sundial, and Work Lodge, like I said, is going to open behind us. So we'll just have to wait and see how that goes. Hey, Lisa. I don't know if she's going to talk or not. Hi. You're on mute. Can you unmute? Bottom left. Bottom left. Yeah, there you go. Hey. So how are you?
I'm okay. You know, interesting.
Yeah, interesting every day. Tell me about your business. What does your business do?
So my business is, as an oncology nurse, I have started a business that helps cancer patients navigate all aspects of healthcare and their cancer care. So we employ nurses and social workers throughout initially Florida, but now it seems to have expanded to New York and Massachusetts.
Okay. How are you finding your ability to have nurses right now with everyone working in COVID?
Actually, nurses are, well, unfortunately, you know, I've been keeping on top of the business of oncology, and it has decreased by 55%. No, excuse me, 50, it was 45 and then it went up to 50% because people aren't getting their, you know, they aren't getting their screenings or once they know they're not going to get their treatment.
Oh.
There's been a decrease. So there's even been layoffs, I believe, or there's been threats of layoffs. And quite honestly, even before the COVID-19 situation, I actually had plenty of nurses, which is really amazing. I've just recently, over the past couple of months, reached out and looked for contractors because that's how I hire, but I hire very specific set of skill sets and, you know, seasoned oncology nurses that have a certification. And I have 18 nurses ready to go.
Oh, wow.
Of the business.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I have a lot of interest because what I'm doing is so unique and so it's really making a difference. And that's really what nurses want to do.
Right.
I think
Andre, how about you? What's your business experiencing?
Well, so I'm in the IT industry. So we got a team of like 10 people all over the world. Some of them are in Germany, some in Russia, some in the US. And so for now it's going okay, but we used to have we usually have a pipeline, right? So all this kind of stuff we were working on from early stages, right? Negotiating and stuff like that. There is a lot of things dropping.
Right.
Yes. So for now, it's going okay. We still have some contracts. We're still working with the entire team, but I feel like that we can see probably the worst or the biggest drop probably coming in a couple of months.
Right.
So it's not happening right now for us because we don't have a shop we had to close, but it's more like working on a long-term basis until you get these contracts. So I feel like we can see a drop in probably 2 or 3 months from now.
Right. Right. Are you going to try and do something different to fill the gap, or are you just going to kind of keep on your normal business as usual process?
Well, basically, so number one is a little bit hope. So we just got a deal with the hospital group because they want to send COVID-19 data to the government. So that was not in the pipeline 2 months ago, as you can imagine, right? So that's a little bit of hope. Like you said, something is dropping and maybe something else is coming up. So it's all agile, right? So that's what I hope a little bit, that these things will happen. And then in the meantime, we're trying to, probably the same as you're doing, we're trying to organize webinars, user groups. And so wherever we have time to kind of keep in touch with the people, get even more connected, and maybe over communicate with existing customers a little bit, just to keep in touch. And so that when they are ready to buy and reopen their business, that they remember us and that we can then keep going in a couple months. So, yeah.
Rob, I know you pivoted from massage therapy back to marketing. So what are you doing?
So what I've done is reach back out to, I have 2 clients in Colorado and I have one in Arizona. And I actually wanted to ask a couple questions regarding my massage therapy business. And that is, so the first month, the landlord came to us and said, we'll forgo that and we'll add it on to the end. Well, my lease ends in June.
Well.
So I'm like, and to be quite frank, I was actually thinking of looking for a larger space because I have a pretty strong feeling that as we come to the end of this, people are going to want to be on the table sooner rather than later, right?
Yes.
We all want that.
Yeah.
You have lots of future patients, right?
Right. And my fiance is a licensed esthetician and she teaches. So we're looking at a space that's larger where we could do 2 services at the same time.
Right.
So I've actually started reaching out to some of my colleagues and kind of seeing, unfortunately, there will be closures, there will be people leaving, coming and goings, and trying to figure out, where is that going to go long term, and just try and get a general feeling for that, especially in St. Pete, because as we know, that whole downtown St. Pete area, your area continues to grow. And as much as I want to be there, it's also quite pricey. So there's all those things to take into account.
Right. No, yeah, those are all hard questions. Yeah, we've had a couple of clients from the law firm side come in and be like, okay, my lease is going to end in the middle of this. Like, what am I supposed to do? And, there's a lot of really specific advice. You have to look at the lease to see what holding over provisions look like, because if it's actually an impossibility to move out because you can't get moving trucks to come physically get your stuff and you haven't been able to open a new location because your new space isn't ready because the construction isn't done. All of those kind of things are things that people are having to work through in their leases, which is pretty challenging. So it's definitely stuff we never thought, speaking as a lawyer who writes leases, these were not scenarios that I had imagined when I wrote leases. My lease, template is changing because of these kind of things, so that there's a way to deal with the stuff in advance and make people less, less at risk, but as a tenant, and as a landlord, frankly. I mean, certainty is better for everybody
Yes.
than lack of certainty. So
I agree. And it's funny because I went back, a couple of weeks ago and reviewed my lease, and it's a one-pager.
oh, nice.
It's very simple. I'm listening to you talk, and I'm extremely grateful for my landlord. I'm extremely grateful for the situation that I'm in, because so far she's been very communicative and appears to be very flexible. So it'll be interesting to see what happens as we proceed through this, and if May 15th is the official
reopen
or not. So we'll stay tuned and see how things go.
Yeah. Lisa, I know your speaker isn't working. I saw that in the chat, but we're glad you're here. So, I don't know if she can even hear that. So, anyway, I don't know if anybody has any other thoughts or questions. I mean, the purpose of this is really just to get people together who are kind of going through this so that we can all kind of figure out the best practices together. So if anybody has any other thoughts.
I think that to a point that Rob made about, places closing and other massage therapy centers closing, people coming out onto the market. I think if you look at what's going on YouTube and Facebook with just the restaurant service industry, you've got bartenders who are out there making their own videos on a daily basis, trying to keep themselves relevant. Chefs that are out there, saying, hey, let me teach you how to cook something real quick. I think we're all going to find that a lot of these displaced workers are going to be very creative and venture out on their own, which should be an interesting.
Yeah. And I think you're going to see a lot of people that had side gigs become their full-time gig, so I think that, will be another transition. So in a way, this may be, in the long run, once we get through the really icky part, it may be positive, in terms of creating more economic value for our communities. But we got to get there first, and we all have to keep our doors open until then. So that's the challenge. That's the challenge.
Do you worry about the recession? I mean, aside from just the disruption.
Oh yeah, no, I mean,
it's really the recession that's the impending recession, and I don't think we'll see that impact until good 6 months.
Right, and that was actually what I talked about last week. Was
okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's good. No, I'm glad someone else is believing what I'm believing. Is that's unfortunately I think that's true. My other business is that the non-Florida business is in the Caribbean, and we do water testing. We're a water quality lab. And so we reopened, we furloughed our employees for 2.5 weeks. We reopened because we do the public drinking water testing. So we had to reopen basically to get the public systems tested. And our commercial clients, we're finding, because most of them are closed now, we're down about 60% on our commercial clients. And truthfully, I'm not sure about their ability long-term to reopen, because a lot of them are smaller restaurants, because we don't have piped water in the Virgin Islands. We use cistern water. So everybody tests their own. But if they can't open their restaurant or their, bed and breakfast or whatever it is, then we're going to lose that client. So it's like one of those things that we're just watching really carefully and trying to see, okay, so what does that mean for my workforce? Like, do I need fewer people? Do I need people working different hours? Like, how's it gonna affect us down? And since we're coming out of the hurricanes of 2017 and we hadn't quite gotten back to baseline even for that, this question, that's what's happening to a lot of my other my customers, is they were still struggling from that. And now this is like one more thing. And our banks in the Virgin Islands, whose name I will not name, none of them successfully got a single PPP application in with the SBA. So we all had our stuff turned in. I mean, many of my friends had them turned in, and nobody got their PPP money yet. So we're hoping that they get it together for the second round. But
yeah, and speaking of that, that's going a different direction. I'm still trying to understand, because I put an application in through my bank, which is Bank of America. Haven't heard one thing. So I don't know. Did I just miss it? Was I not big enough? Was I not 10,000? What was it? What was the other one that got it right?
The EIDL. Yeah.
The big company. And I think,
Oh, yeah. No,
am I not?
and Ruth Chris and all of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have, because the one plus side of working with a community bank is that I have the cell phone of my commercial banker, because she's my commercial banker on a regular basis. So I have been able to check on the status of my application by, crying into the phone at her. That didn't mean that she got it done. It just meant that I at least could ask her about it. I don't know, with Bank of America, if you have a lender, like, or even if you can walk into the branch, well, I guess you can't right now, but go online and virtually visit the branch and ask their commercial lending department to check your application and see, did you submit through the portal that they had?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
that's kind of like me with my SBA one. I'm just like, well, I sent it out there. I'll just check my bank account every day and see if money shows up. But, I'm not counting on it at this point, because
I'm just feeling it's, I think we all are just, there's so many unknowns, and, I'm a planner, so it's really hard for me.
Yeah.
But yet I'm so used to being in this uncertainty, this feeling of uncertainty, and I can handle crises. But as I'm planning, I've been trying to get this business up and running, and it's innovative. And, what if, I'm online, I have virtual capabilities. I have an IT platform that can be, nurses could go anywhere, be anywhere, and patients as well. But the problem is that what if I don't have clients in the business, my B2B, if I get the contracts, I don't know. I have to think of my plan B.
Right. Well, I think we're all spending a lot of time with plan B at the present.
Yeah. And, I got to say, I made an application the other day, and it just felt like a dagger was going through my heart.
Yeah.
Worked so hard on this business for so many years. And I just feel like, oh gosh.
Yeah. No, Thursday and Friday for me last week were definitely days where I'm trying to stay very positive and forward focused, and especially with our co-work members, trying to help them strategize and do things. And Thursday, when I found out the money was gone and my banker was like, gee whiz, didn't get it done, it was a tough day. It really was a tough day. So, but, I guess I just keep going back to, well, I have to say, this is a weird story, but when I was giving birth to my daughter, and it was a very long labor, in the middle of the labor, I said to my then husband, I don't think I can do this. And he said to me, well, if you have a better plan, let me know. So I kind of, which of course resulted in me like kicking him out of the room, but nonetheless,
That's funny.
It's kind of where we are now. It's like we have our businesses, there's only forward. You got to go forward. So, that's what I'm doing regardless. And the other thing I try and tell people that I've been talking to about this is, make the best decision you can at the time. There's not really a right decision or a wrong decision. There's just the best decision you can make with the information you have, which today is changing on a daily basis. So you may be changing every day of how you're going to deal with this. But I think we
wonder why we're not sleeping.
Right, exactly. So hence the need for massages when this is all over. But yes. But yeah, no, I've called it Corona insomnia is what I have, and it's definitely 3-4 in the morning. I'm staring at my ceiling fan going, what am I going to do? So, yeah. But this too shall pass. It always does. I mean, 2008, 2009 passed. It was not pleasant, but it passed. So, this too will pass. I mean, America is very good at business, so we'll get it back together. But
that we actually will learn something from it. And for example, when I look especially at the large corporations, right? I mean, they had exceptionally great years from 2010 until now, right?
Right.
Now it's making a dip, and they're laying off people and everything like that. So I feel like from a maybe even from a legal perspective, like we did with banks and such, we should do the same with like all listed, stock listed, market listed companies, saying, hey, if you got earnings, you have to build reserve funds so that you can go through this pandemic before you pay out all the dividends, right? Something like that, like I do personally, right? Everybody should try to build reserve funds so that you can survive for, I don't know, 3, maybe 6 months personally, right? And I feel like businesses should be forced to do that as well. Maybe not the very small businesses who can't afford that, but especially the big companies, they should be forced to do that. Hey, you guys have to have reserve funds for 6 months so that when something goes wrong, and as we can see, there's always something could go wrong, right? You can't just lay off all your people.
Right, because for small business, the repercussions of that is that our customers are not going to have any money, I mean, because they're laid off. So I don't know, as a lawyer, I don't know what the process would be, other than more federal regulation, which isn't going to happen with our current government, because they are getting rid of regulations instead of increasing them, but which I have a whole nother series of thoughts on. But yeah, to your point, absolutely, because to me, the scariest thing about all of this is that we're looking at 20% unemployment in the United States. And, I was a history major in college, and the year of revolutions happened when there was worldwide unemployment at 18%. So, if we're globally talking about 20% of unemployment, we're going to see some civil unrest unless we figure out, and you're already seeing that with people protesting, trying to reopen businesses. We need to be thinking about that too, and saying, okay, how are we going to help the people that are the most vulnerable in this process? Even though we feel vulnerable, I say this to people too all the time, we're the people making the decision to lay off people, not the people who are getting laid off. And that's a big distinction in terms of feeling powerful or not feeling powerful in a scary situation. So anyway, I think, I agree with you that 100% people should have reserves. And, I also think that a lot of people, for whatever reason, don't right now. So, and that's kind of a traditional American problem. We had that problem in 2008 and 2009 as well. So, and
spending all the money you earn, or even more than that. And this is causing these kind of issues immediately then, right? And I mean, that needs to change.
Yeah, 25% of businesses in the United States surveyed recently said they had less than 30 days operating capital. And
that's what I read as well. And I'm like, how can that be the case? I mean, yes, a lot of companies can't afford that, maybe, but I see so many company and business owners, driving big cars and having big, huge houses, but then they only have like 25 days of reserves.
Yeah, no, it's a hard analysis. I mean, it is. It's like, what is enough? And you work really hard as a business owner. What do I deserve? All of those kind of things. I mean, I think this may recalibrate a little bit of that because I think people always thought that, we'd get bailed out at some point. If they can bail out the banks, they can certainly bail out small business. But I'm not seeing the bailout happen in a way that is really, truly gonna help the people that have made themselves the most vulnerable by not doing any pre-planning, in terms of business owners. But anyway, that's not a very happy note to end this on, guys. Let's talk about something positive.
Well, I do have one more question, Lee. Okay. You talked a lot about contracts for leases and so forth. What about cars? I stepped on a little late, but I just leased a car.
Right.
Brand new car.
Yeah, and you're like, great, I've got payments to do.
Yeah. I mean, I can always go back to work. So, I mean, I'm fortunate in that regard. I will never be without a job. But it's just that, what do you do about a lease if I need it?
Well, I mean, without going too deeply into your individual personal finance, I think a lot of that would depend on, did you finance it through a bank or just through the car dealership? So that, I mean, if you find yourself not able to make the payments, most car leases have an early termination provision in them.
Yeah.
So you can look to see what that does. Some of them are really, really horrible and say things like, you still owe the rest of this lease. We'll let you trade down to a lower car, but you're going to have to pay for longer. You know, but some of them allow for you to just return it without, you know, maybe you lose your deposit, your down payment or something like that. So, so you can check that. And then if you've done it through a bank or whatever, you can also look at refinancing to lower it through a line of credit. Yeah. So,
again, just thinking that second plan.
yeah. Plan B. Plan B.
I don't plan to do it, but I mean, you never know.
No, I mean, I'm doing the same thing. I'm going through all of the household expenses and going, okay, if, you know, if the goal is to keep the workforce, my workforce working, and that means that I can't take as much money from my household, what am I gonna, you know, yeah, I have reserves, but what else am I gonna do to lower those expenses to make it doable for a longer period of time? You know, that's the stress. It's like, which thing is the best thing to do? I don't know, but we're going to get through it. We're going to get through it. And at the end of it, you know, I will, if nothing else, I will have learned a whole bunch of different technology platforms and more about social media than I ever thought I would. So there you go. I've got a skill set now that I didn't.
For sure.
And, you know, maybe another way is like when the gas prices are now below zero, you know, and you drive more with your car for the gas. You know, when you fill it up, they pay you for that. So.
Yeah, so there you go. All right, guys, well, we're getting close to the end of our hour. Thank you so much for joining. Next week, I'll have another one of these kind of conversations, same time. Have no idea. Well, I don't know if I'm going to do one next week, actually. I may skip a week and do it the first week of May just to wait and see what is going on with the federal funding, and then also kind of just get a better chance of, are we talking about reopening yet or not? So anyway, follow our Facebook to see that process. Tina, who's one of our listeners today, is doing one on restaurant and hospitality industry on Wednesday of this week. So which is going to be a lot about supply chain, I think, Tina, right? And restarting. So if you have people who need that information, tell them about that. And otherwise, watch our Facebook page and see what else we have going on. On Fridays, we do good news kind of stories to kind of end the week on a high note, I'm a big technology nerd, not that I know how to do it, but I find it all fascinating. So I've been focusing a lot on cool technology things that are happening as a result of people working together to solve the COVID problem. Tina's going to actually this week also talk about just good people things. So if you like good people stories, join us for that as well. That's at noon on Fridays. But anyway, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you online and hopefully someday in person again as we do all this stuff. Okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.